I think I'm in the wrong place here. Ah, fixed it.
The November 23rd of 2021 meeting of the Transportation Committee will now come to order. Clerk, you please call roll.
Mr. Ansello.
Here,
Mr. Ansello is present. Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is present. Chairman Colby.
Here.
Chairman Colby is present. Mr. Hebert.
here,
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Kufat-Lassie.
here,
Kufat-Lassie is present. Mr. Morelli. Mr. Morelli was on here. Let me just check and see if he's on.
I'm here. Sorry, issue with my connection.
No problem. Legislator Morelli is present. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Smith is present.
We will need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance. You have a non-debatable motion on your agenda which needs to be made and seconded.
Move it, Mr. Chairman.
second,
It's been moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
aye,
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone signed up for public forum?
There is not, and there were no written.
There's no one to address us at this time. We have a presentation from Robert Franklin, the Chief Financial Office, proposal of the 2022 budget, county budget as it pertains to the Transportation Committee. We will have questions and answers following the presentation. It's turned over to you, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And if my slides do not progress, like they did not sometimes last night, please just interrupt me and we'll get it fixed here.
Looks like the same thing from last night. Bob.
This is the 2022 budget presentation to our Transportation Committee. It will be a relatively brief presentation. For a $41 million department, I would say that the DOT budget is pretty flat, increasing just under $200,000 for the proposed 22 budget.
Bob, just a heads up.
Appropriations.
Slide.
Really?
Really?
There you go.
Thank you. Appropriations for, so within our Department of Transportation, we have a couple different divisions I'll highlight. Appropriations for the Division of Traffic Operations and Permits, looks like it's decreasing by about $2.6 million. But I'd like to remind everyone that in the 2021 budget, that included appropriations to fully redeem a 2.8 bond anticipation note for highway lighting. So if we were to back that one-time item out, appropriations would appear to increase by only $200,000. I drew a little white dotted line around the next two lines. Our Transportation Department rearranged how they manage their work going into next year. So comparing proposed appropriations in 21 versus 22 isn't so neat and clean. Previously, our Department of Transportation arranged their operations such that the focus of their work was split between highways and bridges. Going forward, the focus of the work will be more split between operations and engineering. But combined, the proposed appropriations for those two items amount to about $31.6 million. It's an increase of just less than $2.9 million from the 21 adopted budget. The increase here is attributable to the additional work the Department of Transportation is able to accomplish with additional funding related to the CHIPS program, PAVE New York, and the Extreme Weather Recovery Funds funding. a higher estimated cost of snow and ice removal contracts with the towns, and of course, a portion of the increase is also the result of anticipated contract settlements and the associated pay increase for collective bargaining agreements. Looking at the department's total revenues, because we don't have a bond anticipation note to redeem next year, we will not have the corresponding revenue from appropriated fund balance, which had been included in the 21 budget. Offsetting that particular reduction, however, is the expectation of additional funding, again, related to CHIPS, Pave New York, and extreme weather recovery funds. Just not to the same extent. Therefore, total revenues are actually coming down for the department by about $600,000. And then finally, on my last slide, Mr. Chairman, I think the committee is aware that Monroe County is required to match New York State funding of RGRTA. This particular appropriation, however, is not accounted for within our Department of Transportation, but rather you will find it within the section of the budget book for finance unallocated. Chairman, that really concludes my presentation. At your convenience, we can field questions from the members.
Thank you, Robert Franklin. Is there any of the committee members have a question?
Legislator Smith?
Legislator Smith, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, can you provide the legislature with a breakdown of all the positions that fall under this portion of the 2021 budget that are authorized, funded, and vacant?
Mr. Chairman, all due respect, we in the budget office tend to resist providing that type of information. When we run these reports, they are point-in-time information, and I'm just very hesitant to produce a report that could be out of date within as little of a week's time.
Okay. Through the chair, would you be able to let us know what the percentage of the department's budget is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Chairman, we did not make that presentation in the budget book. I will have to follow up for the committee.
Thank you. Through the chair, what is the breakdown of the DOT budget as it relates to the appropriations charged to the general fund, road fund, debit service fund, and the capital projects fund?
Mr. Chairman, our Department of Transportation is accounted for in our road fund. All of the appropriations are accounted for in the road fund. There are transfers to other funds, however. I believe on page 319 of the budget book, you will observe that our Department of Transportation requires net county support to the tune of just over $25.2 million. That actually comes from the general fund. So when the general fund, when the legislature levies taxes, those taxes are accounted for in the general fund and a transfer is made to transportation. Also on page 319, you will see under appropriations by object, a line item for debt service. The road fund does not account for its own debt service, but rather it's required to transfer funds to our debt service fund. So the roughly $16.1 million in debt service for 22 is accounted for in our debt service fund. I will also point out, again, on page 319 of the budget book, the very bottom line for revenue is called appropriated fund balance. Both for the 21 amended and the 22 proposed budget, those dollar amounts are all accounted for in the debt service fund. That is it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Through the chair, how much, if any, unrestricted general fund balance is being applied to the transportation budget? And if unrestricted general fund balance is being applied, what's the breakdown of the restricted versus the unrestricted applied fund balance?
Mr. Chairman, we actually are not appropriating any general fund balance for our Department of Transportation. I will clarify, we do have appropriated fund balance. As I mentioned, it's at the bottom of page 319. That is from our debt service fund. The $850,319 is entirely out of our reserve for bonded debt. The amended budget for 21, there was an apportionment between our reserve for bonded debt and the unrestricted portion of our debt service fund. But overall, Mr. Chairman, no general fund balance supports DOT.
Okay. And through the chair, does the 2022 proposed budget allocate any cash capital for the county DOT projects? And if so, why was the decision made to use cash capital instead of additional debt services?
Mr. Chairman, our transportation department does have, I believe it's 4 cash capital projects. They are identified in the currently adopted CIP. Those projects are all of recurring appropriations. They are authorized each year of the same dollar amount or very similar dollar amounts. And for Monroe County, in our transportation department, those projects are, I'm going from memory here, but generally authorized for a 10 or 15-year period of probable usefulness. It only takes about, for those projects, 9, 10, or 11 years before the annual debt service would outpace the appropriations otherwise needed to run the project. So for this county, we can go much cheaper if we move forward with cash capital funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Franklin, for the answers to that. I am all set. I yield the floor.
Is there any other members of the committee have a question at this time? I have one for you, Franklin. You were talking about on page 319, the appropriate fund balance, and why is that almost 3 million, a little over 3 million in 2021 budget, and proposed budget is only 850,000? Is that because of that one-time $2 million expenditure for the lighting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It was, in round numbers, roughly, I'm going to say $2.8 million from the unrestricted portion of our debt service fund for that bond anticipation note. That got paid off in April of this year. The remaining dollars was our reserve for bonded debt, and that is what is continuing into the year 22.
The other question I have for you is, there's an increase of to the towns of about 700,000 from 2021 to 2022. Is that for snow removal, or is that for projects?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what page you're on, but you did mention payment to our towns, and the answer is going to be yes on both counts. There is a slight increase in our estimate of what our snow and ice removal contracts are going to be for next year, but because we are recognizing additional funding from CHIPS, Pave New York, and the Extreme Weather Recovery Funds, that additional funding supports appropriations for projects which we do pay the towns to run a portion of. So towns are receiving additional funds because of snow and ice, but also because of those special areas of CHIPS and Pave New York.
I was on 546 in the one that says Public Works Service for Towns, 504330. That helps you? I think that's where I was.
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. That is definitely encompassed, that particular page and that account definitely encompasses our snow and ice removal contracts and the town labor and equipment related to our CHIPS and Pave New York projects. This particular line, Mr. Chairman, also accounts for the payments we pay towns for snow fencing, roadkill removal, and mowing.
You mentioned storm fund or one-time fund. Could you explain to me what that is? When you were answering Smith's question, I think. Do you know what I'm alluding to?
Actually, I don't, Mr. Chairman. Our one-time funding that we used is within appropriated fund balance. It's what we used to fully redeem the bond anticipation note last year. Legislator Smith could remind me of what that question pertained to.
Well, your answer was in lieu, you said three things. You said chips increase and the increase for snow removal. And the third thing was emergency storm fund or something like that. I didn't only half caught it.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, yes. Our extreme weather recovery funding, yes. That is,
go ahead. Could you explain that fund to me and where does it show? I don't see a line item for that number, for that.
Oh, no, you don't actually, Mr. Chairman. That is a revenue source. It comes from New York State, and that supports our appropriations for the public works services, like you will see on page 546, which you identified public works service contracts with the towns.
What's that fund supposed to be targeting then? What type of projects? I mean, the snow and ice makes sense, and the chips makes sense about road repairs or resurfacing. What does the?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In addition to snow and ice, we do have our Acting Director of Transportation, Mr. Tom Fries, on the line. If the Director Fries would like to expand on what, in addition to snow and ice removal, extreme weather recovery funding pertains to.
Yes, absolutely. Through the chair, there's three programs as mentioned. There's the CHIPS program, Pave New York, and Extreme Winter Recovery. Extreme Winter Recovery was basically for roads that took abuse throughout winter, and basically it's a separate pool of money that we use to rehabilitate the roads. Same thing with CHIPS. Like CHIPS money, I can pretty much use for any rehabilitation project. Pave New York money, I can only use for actual paving projects. I can't use it for any chip seals. I can't use it for anything like that. It actually has to be a paved project. And then Extreme Winter Recovery is basically just an extreme weather event sort of program. There are certain restrictions for what the money can be used for, but it's basically just a separate pot that we could use for rehabilitation of roads.
Is that fund depends on how bad of winter we have or weather, or is that fund a set amount and then you can, is it like come through like the CHIPS fund, or is it varying depending on what our weather is like?
Through the chair, again, it slightly changes every year. I don't believe it's necessarily based on how bad the winters are. It's kind of more or less a kind of a set amount, but it can change every year based on availability of funds.
Okay. Most of the projects and the snow removal is all done by the towns. And can you decide now, I know the towns get contracts for what roads they're responsible for, but some of the towns go over town lines to work in other towns for the county. How do you determine which town gets the work to do the work versus another town? On county road?
Yeah, through the chair, that's more or less made up by the towns themselves. For the most part, if it's a county road within a town, that particular town will plow it unless it makes more sense to circle through to like turn around or do something like that.
I'm not talking about I guess, not to interrupt you, but I'm not talking about plowing roads. I'm talking about the repair roads, resurfacing roads, those type projects. Like when you go and mill a road, which towns trucks get to decide to draw the millings away and stuff like that.
Oh, certainly, yes, through the chair. Normally what we do is we offer the work to the lead town first. So if there's a real maintenance project that happens to be in let's say the town of Rush will get first option to do the work. But oftentimes the work is maybe beyond their resources. So they have to bring in some other towns to help out with trucking and things like that. That would be up to the lead town themselves. And then there's also other times where we offer the work where the towns refuse the work. And in those cases, we try to find another town that's willing to go to that town to do the work. And then the towns themselves decide how much additional effort or resources they need from other towns.
When do you decide to use towns versus using private contractors? Because I've seen in some projects, there's been some contractors being used.
Yes, through the chair, it's based pretty much on the level of maintenance rehabilitation effort that we're trying to do. If it's something like a cold in place recycle or a hot in place recycle, the towns don't have the equipment to do things like that. So in those cases, we actually have to hire the specific contractor to do the work. If it's something like a chip seal or something like that, then the towns would take the lead in that.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the committee? I'll give you another chance to ask any questions. Seeing none. We don't have any matters, do we?
Approve the minutes.
Okay. The next is approval of minutes. We have the October 26 minutes, 2021 minutes of the Transportation Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes at the end of the day.
Chairman Colby?
Yeah.
I just noticed that Legislator Morelli and I are listed twice on the minutes. Our attendance is listed under both members and other legislators present. So I just wanted to make that correction.
I will update that and make sure that it's checked accordingly.
Thank you.
You're just extra important, that's why.
You don't want there to be two of us.
Oh, we have a referral.
We have new business.
So we have new business to go before us.
Yep.
The clerk, could you read the?
Yep, referral 21-0443. Authorize a contract with the New York State Department of Transportation for maintenance of state traffic signal equipment.
Move it, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Brenda Settle and seconded by Legislator Smith. Any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Oh, Legislator, you're not part of the committee. Yes,
Yes,
you
he
are.
is.
Yeah, Legislator Hebert, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm the least important part of the committee. Thank you, Mr. President. Through the administration. Does the state request that we perform this maintenance, or do we determine when to do the maintenance?
Through the chair, what it has to do with is minor repairs, such as if a traffic signal bulb is out, the dispatch would get the phone call and we'd go out and take care of it for them. Anything more major than that, and the state's actually responsible for it.
Okay, thank you. How do we, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, how do we track what the value is of work like that we've done? Say we went and changed 5 light bulbs today. How would we know what that should charge?
Through the chair, it's kind of a yearly average that we sort of track. It's roughly maybe about $1,000 per year per signal. That's more or less what the agreement with them is. And then we have to renew the agreement every 2 years with them just to keep maintaining their signals for them.
And thank you. And through Mr. Chairman, just one last question. Is there any chance that our county taxpayers are paying for state maintenance when they shouldn't be because we've overrun what was allowed?
Through the chair, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor.
Is there any other questions from the committee on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any other matters to become before this committee? There being no other matters, the November 23rd meeting, 2021 meeting of the Transportation Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of Transportation Committee will be announced.